Hello everybody, my name is Alessandra Calvi and I am a PhD candidate in the Law, Science, Technology and Society Research Group of the Vrije Universiteit Brussels and in the DPIA lab and in the ETHIS lab of CY Cergy Paris Université. My PhD is founded under the Utopia PhD Co-Tutel program and today I am here to present a paper that I co-author with my co-supervisor, Professor Dimitris Kotzinos, and the paper is entitled Enhancing a Fairness Through Impact Assessment in the European Union, a Legal and Computer Science Perspective. First, let me briefly introduce the concept of impact assessment and algorithmic impact assessment for those of you who are not familiar with them. Impact assessments in general can be defined as evaluation techniques used to analyze ex ante possible consequences of an initiative for relevant societal concerns, with the twofold objectives of support informed decision-making by the proponent of certain initiatives and protect said societal concerns. Several impact assessments exist. We have environmental impact assessment, privacy impact assessment, ethics impact assessment, and so on. But today I would like to focus specifically on algorithmic impact assessments. They can be defined as iterative processes used to investigate possible short and long-term societal impacts of AI systems before they are used, but with an ongoing monitoring and periodic revisiting even after their implementation. In relation to AI fairness, we contend that when conducted in a participatory and transparent way, algorithmic impact assessments allow to contextualize fairness, and therefore they allow to reconcile the multiple definitions of fairness that exist in the legal, social, and computer science domains. Our research method is essentially a desk analysis. We consulted relevant legal and computer science literature, guidance issued by European data protection regulators, and EU policy documents. As regards our position in relation to existing scholarship, like other scholars on AI fairness, we contend that fairness is a socio-technical concept and problem that needs to be addressed by adopting a multidisciplinary perspective. We defend the idea that algorithmic impact assessments, as well as other forms of impact assessment, could help us develop better, fairer AI solutions. Nevertheless, we remain open to the use of fairness metrics. Indeed, although we know that a wide number of social scientists is against them, we still think that when they are inserted in the context of an impact assessment that can be combined with a precautionary principle, they can still be useful to protect people. From a legal doctrinal point of view, we propose two novelties. First, we investigate the role of fairness metrics under the GDPR, the Digital Service Act, and the Artificial Intelligence Regulation proposal, and then we compare three assessment procedures foreseen under the regulations previously mentioned, namely the Data Protection Impact Assessment, the DSA Risk Assessment, and the Conformity Assessment. Furthermore, in the appendix, we briefly refer to the Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment that the European Parliament proposed to introduce at the end of April in the context of the VAI regulation proposal. First, we provide an overview of the multiple definitions of fairness existing in social sciences. We provide legal and philosophical insights. We recommend to link fairness to the concept of social justice. To overcome narrow approaches thereto, they equate fairness to non-discrimination. Then we briefly illustrate the specificity of fairness as a general principle of personal data processing. We emphasize how the European Data Protection Supervisor and the European Data Protection Board has linked fairness to several principles, including non-risk transfer that becomes extremely relevant in the context of impact assessment. In the part about fairness in computer science, we explain how fairness is considered as a mathematical property of algorithms and how multiple definitions of fairness corresponding to different metrics exist. We explain the situation of impossibility of fairness that depends on the fact that these metrics are multiple and cannot be satisfiable all at the same time. We then illustrate most known fairness metrics, group fairness metrics, emphasizing the legal and ethical principle underpinning them as well as the main drawbacks. And finally, we propose a classification of fairness metrics in the General Data Protection Regulation, the Digital Services Act, and the Artificial Intelligence Regulation proposal, that despite not mentioning expressly fairness metrics, refer to them in an indirect way in multiple instances. For example, use of fairness metrics seems essential to comply with the requirements set in Title III, Chapter 2 of the Artificial Intelligence Regulation proposal, and therefore becomes relevant in the context of conformity assessment. This demonstrates that the conformity assessment is far from being a mere technical procedure, because the choices performed in terms of fairness metrics could have important impacts on fundamental rights of people, since adhering to a fairness metrics compared to another determines necessarily trade-off. We provide an overview of algorithmic impact assessment, emphasizing their advantages. For example, thanks to their participatory and interdisciplinary nature, they could allow to reattach the societal and regulatory context to mathematical definition of fairness by promoting interdisciplinary dialogues. Furthermore, they can be combined with the precautionary principle and so on. However, we highlight also their drawbacks. They could be very costly, time-consuming. They bring about risks of participation washing, and above all, they are not legally binding in the European Union. And that is why we decided to analyze three forms of assessments that, despite not being strictly speaking algorithmic impact assessments, are still expected to affect AI development in the future and are or will be legally binding. So we compare them under different profiles, for example, the entity obliged to perform them, the transparency provision that they encompass, public and expert participation, and so on. We concluded them, although to different extents. All these assessments could allow us to discover possible short and long-term societal impacts of AI systems. This suggests that future algorithmic impact assessment may evolve to become integrated impact assessment, involving different actors depending, for example, on the phase of the AI life cycle, on the types of data, and so on. And in effect, current voluntary schemes for algorithmic impact assessment in Europe suggest to append their data protection impact assessments and fundamental rights impact assessment. However, some open questions remain. There will be problems in terms of actors to be involved, their responsibility and supervision, which kind of transparency provision should be adopted, the approach to be adopted towards public and expert participation, and so on. Also, a profile that is often overlooked in the context of impact assessment, but we recommend to consider, is the provision of remedies for the impact assessment related violations. Therefore, we showed how there are multiple legal and regulatory tools that could be used to promote fairness, and there is also an effort in computer science to understand and measure it. These two goals appear compatible and can be combined. However, further empirical research is needed. First, about the possible societal impacts of fairness metrics in different societal contexts. Then about other techniques, for example, causal graph that could be used to ensure fairness, as well as their role in the assessment processes previously described. Also, when the practice of these assessments consolidate, it will be necessary to investigate possible loopholes in their coordination and information exchange, as well as their suitability to positively affect AI development, to see whether they are considered just tick boxing exercises or not. Finally, it will be necessary to elaborate methods and techniques to meaningfully involve the public and experts in the assessment processes. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to replying to your questions.